Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back with Riot Kent to talk about patch 13.16. I believe this is our second to last patch of the first half of Runeterra Reforged. So, Kent, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk about this patch. We're gonna have the mid-set finale on this patch, which is, uh, it's called the mid-set finale, but it's not played on the mid-set, so that's an interesting name. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the big tournament patch.
Yeah, I mean, for NA, it's a big tournament patch. For a lot of other regions, they're running some of their other stuff as well. But the big thing also is we're starting to plan for, get ready for the mid set. We can't talk about anything in there yet, but kind of making some changes to get ready for it. So, yeah, overall, it's still a decently sized patch. Honestly, probably a little bigger than I think we'd like at this point. But it's a lot of minor stuff. There's no major reworks. There's no huge swings, I don't think. So, does that sound about right?
Yeah, so at this point in the set, we're kind of focused a lot on the fine-tuning. No, not many like large changes, no real big reworks, just lots of small changes that you'll see. So the patch kind of looks big, but they're like small changes for fine-tuning, especially in like the augments in the trait space, or individual items and things like that.
Yep. Well, sweet. Let's jump right into it and get through this. All right. First up on the system side, minor quality of life change. Shop highlights will now always take units on your board into account. This was usually a thing where you'd have like one Samir on the board, one on the bench. Combat would start, and then actually, well, on the bench counts. But anyway, you'd have like two on the board, and it wouldn't glow. Small quality of life thing. The glow will be more accurate for units you want to buy. Minor thing here. On the portal side, Yordle Portal has been changed to Fleshing Arena. It is literally the exact same portal. The only difference here is that now it's a Noxus portal. We're trying to even out some of the portal counts so that maybe you'll actually see Noxus rise. That's really about it. So that's what that's for. Hall of 9, we've significantly reduced the gold given. I believe the multiplier went from 8 to 5. So you'll get a little less gold on those. And then the 2-star champ option is now stage -1 instead of stage. So no more 2-star 5 cost on stage 5-1. Like that's a little too swingy. Now you'll have to wait till stage 6 to have something that swingy. Again, Hall of 9 is a very fun portal, but those two in particular were a little too crazy. Unstable Rift blue buff is now disabled from appearing. There's a bug with that. We haven't been able to fix the bug yet, so just disabled that. And then the last one, why don't you talk about the last one, Kent?
Yeah. So we made some item changes last patch for the distribution of items, and we like how it's going so far. But one of the impacts of that change was basically sometimes you would only get one item from Raptors. And let's say you have one item on your bench, one item from Raptors. Now you're kind of like, you don't have any flexibility there. You have to build that final item, and that feels pretty bad. And so we're ready to bring back the final component anvil. We kind of held off on this for a little while in the set because players have to learn a new set. There's a lot of new content this set, and having to make a decision on the item would be kind of just a lot for a lot of our more casual players. But now everyone's more familiar with the set. The people who stick around, have played a lot of the set, and so we're ready to bring this back. It should help make your items feel a lot more flexible once you get your final few
So
components.
So I'm going to call us out a little bit here. I think, we took this away at the start of the set because we thought there were too many decisions, and now we're bringing it back. Can we publicly commit that maybe we don't take this away next set as well? Because I think, again, having this like final PvE round anvil, I think has been really good, and even in our play tests and on PvE so far, I think it's been nice to see this back. So I don't know. I'm really convinced this needs to be a permanent thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. This was a set that was kind of a bit on the more complex side, a lot more things and decisions to think about. And so we kind of tried it out of not having it, but it feels so much better when it exists. And
Yeah,
so feel pretty good about committing to it too.
sweet. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, trade side. Demacia. I think Demacia is one that's interesting. If you look in our data, it looks like it's doing okay. But especially at high elo, no one's really playing it for a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that, 7 and 5 aren't particularly exciting. There's some unit issues as well, which we'll talk about a little later. But for now, what we're doing is actually taking a pretty big play here is that Demacia 7 and 9 will now gain an extra elite. So that means another Radiant item, which is good. 5 is getting 5 extra armor and MR. Not too crazy here. Again, we're trying not to swing too hard. And then 7 and 9 are losing a little bit of armor and MR. But again, that's to make up for the Radiant item, the extra elite, things like that. And again, you'll see some unit changes later, but hopefully this brings Demacia up to something that even at high elo will be considered as a vertical.
Yeah, really just trying to. Demacia's never kind of like shined as a vertical this set, so really trying to take some big swings here to make sure that it has its time.
Yep. Gunner, you'll see this later. There's changes to things like Zeri, but right now no one's really playing vertical Gunner. The trait itself is not really performing well. The augments are not really doing well either. So just giving a small bump to specifically Gunner 4 and 6. So making that a little bit more playable. And again, you'll see some Zeri changes later, so nothing crazy here. Cool.
Yep.
On the multicaster side, we're trying to pull some of the power out of multicaster, the trait, and allowing the champions to do well. So this might mean you actually consider playing them without multicaster, or maybe only 2 multicaster. So they're not just so hard bound. So you'll see all the champions later get some buffs, but we are nerfing the power of the trait. And again, it should end up generally a little bit power neutral, but help their early game quite a bit. Multicaster really struggles in the early game, and then when you 3-star all of them, you explode the enemy board. So trying to shift that a little bit here.
Yeah, two multicaster at a 2/4 was above our framework for how much power it should give the individual champions. And so by reducing that, we kind of fit it into that framework a little bit better. But also, as Mort mentioned, those problems helps solve that. And you do a little bit more single target damage so that you can like kill the thing that you're hitting and less like blow up the board when you hit everything 3-star. So that'll also be a nice improvement. So you save health and less blow up everything later.
Yep. Shadow Isles, minor adjustment here. 6-piece was too strong. If you got an emblem and you found a Senna, very, very powerful. So bringing that down. But at the same time, throwing in 2 Shadow Isles late game, something like a Gwen Senna, really wasn't worth it. Oftentimes you were willing to play a Senna without that Gwen because Shadow Isles just wasn't enough of a bump. So trying to bring that up a little. Again, normally, if it was earlier, we might swing a little harder here, but trying not to balance Thrash too hard here. So just small buff to 2, small nerf to 6.
And you'll also see a couple small changes to a couple of the Shadow Isles units later, so that that also brings up 4 a little bit. If you don't have an emblem, maybe you'll think about Shadow Isles 4. You get a little bit of auxiliary power from some of the units.
Yep. Shurima Vertical is another one that has fallen off a little bit. Not a lot of people playing Shurima Vertical, increasing its power. Very minor here, but a little extra HP, a little extra bonus at 7.
Yep.
Cool. All right, you want to cover Zaun?
Yeah. So Zaun, clearly really strong this patch. There are specifically some of the implants like Chem Tank and Robotic Arm are disgustingly strong in the right setups, especially with an emblem. So bringing down Robotic Arm, Chem Tank, bringing down the damage and the proc chance of those to bring them to a more reasonable level, and also bring up some of the really lower performing ones like Adaptive Implant. We want you to be excited when you hit this. You can put it on Urgot and you kind of he uses all of those stats really well. Or Exoskeleton. The heal goes up, but more importantly, it now actually cleanses all debuffs, including Burn, Wound, Shred, Sunder, Mana Reef, basically everything. That's kind of what it should do because, it's supposed to just cleanse. And now, it actually basically gives the unit a mini QSS. It should be very tempting for a unit like Urgot to have. And the last thing is the overcharge damage no longer triggers on Sion Revive. Didn't really make any sense, but that's kind of how the interaction worked for a long time. It was the only way to really play Exoskeleton, and we wanted to make it sure that it's strong enough outside of that interaction, but not also make that interaction even stronger. And also intuitively, it didn't make that much sense.
Cool. Yeah, I think the other one, the Unstable Chem Tank nerf, that Jarvan explosion, I think pretty big. Robotic Arm just a little less powerful. So Robotic Arm versus Adaptive Plant versus Shimmering should all be a lot closer now. I think the one thing to tease you on is it sounds like they're all really good on Urgot. Seems like quite good on Urgot. So detecting a theme here.
Well, the frontline forecast, those are the frontline forecast items. But also one thing on Chem Tank, we want to keep it exciting. If it only hit if we didn't scale up the explosion radius, it would only ever hit the front line. And so this will still be good on Jarvan. It won't wipe out everything, and you'll still need damage to help clean up everything. That's kind of the important part. Right now, it just deals way too much damage.
Yep, agreed. All right, on the champion side, you want to cover Kale? I know this is one you guys were working on.
Yeah. So Kale, I kind of together with Poppy here, but basically, Kale is a unit you never really buy in stage 2, and you never put on your board unless you're playing Kale. And we kind of want to move away from that, where you can actually use Kale as an item holder. So the base on hit damage is going up a decent amount. You know, she's already dealing a good amount of damage with the AD buff from last patch, just not quite there yet. So this brings it up. But we also know that the cap of Kale, once you hit everything, is really high. And so we also want to bring down that cap. So in exchange for stronger stage 2 power, you lose some of that reroll, capped out Kale board power. And so that's why we're bringing down the wave damage. Poppy is more of like a quality of life change. Right now, sometimes you'll have bad logic where she doesn't hit the large clump that you want. And so this just helps clean that up a little bit and makes it so that there's a little bit more consistency in her spell. This also helps even out some of the nerfs to the capped Kale comp.
Yep. I think it's also worth noting that, if you look at these numbers, it's not a big change. It's a pretty minor change. But the thing to note here is, again, we're trying not to balance Thresh, but this now gives us the levers so that if we need to, buff stage 2 Kale or nerf level 9 Kale, we can do that a lot better now, because before the numbers were tied together.
Yep.
Sweet. Orianna, this one's always funny, because if you ever saw my Orianna 3 with double radiant item Ionia game,
man,
Orianna's not so great, because as soon as she casts, she needs 2 seconds before she'll start autoing again, which is a very long time in TFT terms. So now I believe we cut that in half to 1 second, so she should be able to get right back to attacking. But the other thing I'll call out is that every time we've done a change like this, the champion ends up very strong. So I would just say, don't sleep on this Orianna change. It looks like a small change, but this might make Orianna really good. So consider maybe trying some Orianna builds next patch.
Yeah, you won't feel this as much on like a normal Orianna. She's normally attacks kind of slow. Anyways, it mostly is like if you have a little bit of attack speed or you're really trying to carry her, you're gonna feel this a lot more. So,
yep.
Yeah, Orianna carry. Let's go. Let's watch that Laduk video.
Samira, clearly the S tier miss of last patch. I think this was, again, another one where last patch you look at the notes and all it was the spell now works and doesn't, and casts a little quicker. And it really exposed just how good she could be, specifically around the armor shred. If you had a Samira 3 with like blue buff and Noxus and that was it, you were shredding 55 armor per shot, which was insane. And then you could get into negative armor very quickly, which would then be multiplicative damage scaling, which got insane. So we're hitting that really hard here. You can see, almost cut in half at 1 star, pretty big nerf at even 3 star, going down to 20. But the other big part here is you can no longer reduce armor below 0. And this is something we're probably going to be doing across TFT as a whole. It doesn't really make sense for our game to have negative armor. It just isn't something. It's very confusing. Only the math nerds really understand how it works. So we're actually going to be taking that out. And that's going to be a pretty decent nerf to Samira. But we didn't want to completely gut her and still have her be playable. So she actually does get some compensation buff to the actual damage of the spell. Again, this is intended to overall be a very large nerf. You can actually build armor against her now and actually be able to stop her. But we didn't want to, again, gut her. So a lot going on there.
Yeah, she from last patch. For those of you who like to look into items and their stats and things like that, she wasn't very good with Infinity Edge. It's because a lot of times she's just stealing most of her damage. You want some of that AP on her to help shred faster, and then most of her damage just comes from those autos who like destroy things, and then the spell itself doesn't actually hit that hard. And so we want to put a little bit more emphasis into the damage of her spell here and take away from the armor shred so that she's not just like focused on autoing. You kind of care about that spell chunking people pretty hard too.
And then Viego has just been kind of underperforming for a 1 cost, so a very, very small armor and MR nerf, or buff, excuse me. This maybe, enables, we've seen some interesting builds in China where you play like Targon Viego, so maybe this helps that out a little bit, but hoping to maybe see some Viego builds kind of come back into the meta.
And just also a little bit of help to the mid game for Shadow Isles. Viego with the shield gets to, get a lot more effective HP with this 5 armor and MR.
On the 2 cost side, you want to cover Ashe?
Yeah, so Ash has turned after the last patch when we made the change to Morello, turned into this Morello or Last Whisper bot, and it's really sad. And we've seen some people make Ash carry work-ish, but really want to emphasize Ash not being a just a Last Whisper or Morello holder, more of a you can make her your 3-star carry if you invest into her. So giving her a buff to her attack speed so that her autos, continuously do more damage, but nerfing her mana, her cycle, and her starting cast so that she can still hold those items. Just that's not the focus anymore as a supportive unit with no items. And then giving her also in compensation for that a little bit more of her damage back. So if you do build AD on her, it scales just that a little bit better.
Yep, sweet. Hopefully, maybe Ash reroll can actually be like not just a meme build. So hopefully this helps. Galio, this one's pretty obvious, but Galio, we always kind of were afraid of the stage 2 Galio 2 with a free radiant item from Demacia, so we were always really cautious. But despite the numerous very small buffs, Galio just hasn't been performing. No one's excited for a 2-star Galio, and that's one of the other reasons why Demacia really suffers in the early game. It's why Kale mostly plays around Poppy as opposed to Galio. So we're giving Galio, another 5% spell damage reduction, which, you might look at this and go, well, it's only 5%, but actually that's, at 1 and 2-star, that is a 25% buff to this part, and that's multiplicative on all the other damage reduction. So this should make him pretty beefy. In testing, I found Galio 3s now to actually be really, really strong. And so, again, this is one of those pieces that should hopefully allow Demacia Vertical to be something you can play.
Yep.
Sweet. Kled, this is a change. I'll level with you. It's a small buff. Is it going to move the needle and make Kled carry playable like the thing? No. I think there's honestly still more work to do. I'm glad we're being cautious on this, but it is a small buff to Kled, and there's still more work to do here, I think.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, we have seen Kled metas, we have seen Slayer Kled dominate, and when Kled is good. And so want to move slowly here. Kled might need a little bit more in the next patch, but just kind of moving slowly, inching up Slayers, inching up Kled back up to what his former glory was a couple patches ago.
All right, Swain. Swain was the hotly contested, like when we announced last patch, I think everyone was very, very worried about Swain. And Swain's a little strong, but he's really overshadowed by Samira, let's not lie. The thing with Swain, though, is we're still not happy with where he is, because what Swain is like if you have him on 2-1 to 2-3, he is amazing. You are going to struggle to kill that. You're going to get your Noxus stacks. You're going to snowball off it really hard. Especially if you have like the Caitlyn into Swain 2, like that's an amazing opener. But if you tried to play like Swain 3, that's still garbage. It's still just absolutely atrocious. So trying to shift that a bit here. And so what you're going to see is a little less mana, starting mana. Nothing crazy here, just to slow down that first cast. And then 1-star actually gets the biggest nerf here. So if you've got a 1-star Swain, it's not going to be quite as much of a free win. 2-star only gets a small nerf here, but a little nerf. And then 3-star actually gets a buff. And again, I still think this spell, we still actually got even more work to do here. It's just kind of the property of the spell that he has this 5-second mana lock. There's also still some work to do around Demon Flare. I don't think this makes 3-star Galio or 3-star Swain with Demon Flare any good, so don't think about that yet. But it's just one of those things that we're going to have to keep poking at.
Yeah, we do have some, longer term plans. Thinking about what else we can do here, basically, to make it good for next patch. But generally, just trying to do nerfs targeted at the early games. The mana also hurts early game a little bit more. His pool is a little bit smaller, that kind of thing. His health pool is a little bit smaller, so he can't soak as much damage for guaranteeing that first cast. And so you kind of need to put items on him, that kind of thing, to make him more valuable early game instead of being just a menace out the bat.
Cool. On the 2-cost side, we talked about multicasters. This is mostly compensation for the multicaster nerf. So Talia gets a small buff. Again, this is to compensate for multicaster. Teemo, same thing, although a little bit more. We're still not quite happy with where Teemo's ended up, so we are cranking that needle just a little bit more for Teemo, because again, we want to see some Teemo comps do well. And then the multicast Shroom logic, we actually ended up reverting this. We know a lot of players weren't particularly happy. For us, the big thing was it created some weird positioning optimizations where there were ways to game it so that the mushroom would go in the wrong spot. There might still be work to do here because it's kind of back to random bounces, I believe, which, can lead to some really wild fight RNG. But this should make Teemo feel better and avoid those sort of exploitive ways to dodge his mushrooms.
Yeah, just trying to really make sure that you can kind of stabilize on Teemo before you hit Teemo 4, because we know Teemo 4 is good. It just, the path to Teemo 4 is really tough. And so making sure these buffs, like you'll see the buffs to 1 and 2 are actually quite large. So it should feel good. And also because it deals less, it's less focused on the multicast, since we nerfed the multicast and put power into the actual spell, you can actually kill some things and save health. So that's the main thing.
Yep. All right, on the 3-cost side, you want to cover Garen?
Yeah, so there are some players who've found success with Garen. It's still pretty niche. Taking a little bit bigger of a swing here, basically, of like moving up his 1 and 2 star up a decent amount, so that we'll probably see some more Garen with buffs to early game other Demacia units. We're hoping that Garen is a unit in stage 2 that you're actually feel good about putting items on, whether or not you reroll him.
Cool. Yeah, I also think this is nice for Demacia, so that if you have like a spare Garen 2, it's just going to be a little bit better. You can see here going from 75 to 82 at 2-star. It's actually pretty chunky, so hopefully that helps out a bit. Callista, bit of a damage to help Shadow Isles in the mid game. Also, this probably helps Challenger a bit. We've seen some Callista builds do okay, but they usually fall off in the late game. So maybe some 3-star Callista builds can find even more success after this.
Yeah, another also small thing to buff up Shadow Isles 4 in the mid game when you want to play with her. That would help too.
Yep. Sona. So she's the one multicaster who does not get compensation buffs to her damage. Frankly, she was already doing a little bit more damage than we were comfortable with for how much support she provides. Vel'Koz was really supposed to be the star, but you get a Sorcerer Sona, and that was way, way better. And it'll still be good, to be honest. But we are buffing the attack speed so that if you want to run Sona in something like a Demacia comp, you can benefit from that attack speed. And so, again, that's just another slight bump to Demacia.
Yeah, and before, 4 Demacia buffs, we are buffing Demacia 7 and 9, and there's nobody playing Demacia 7 and 9. And also, these buffs to a lot of these units are not actually like, Galio gets a little bit, Sona gets a little bit, but also Sona is losing some multicaster buffs, getting a multicaster nerf, that kind of thing. It's not going to be like, we're not expecting a huge swing basically here by all these buffs.
Kent's just saying this so he can hit Challenger off 20 out of 20 Demacia. Don't listen to him. Yeah. Don't listen to him.
Me Garen every game. Don't worry.
It is absolutely a Demacia meta next patch. Okay, Vel'Koz. Now this is actually the one I'm probably the most cautious on. He gets his compensation buff for the multicast. But the big thing here, and again, this is where every time we make a change like this, it seems small, cough, cough, Samira, and then it turns out really good. Vel'Koz had a very similar issue to Samira, which is like if the target moved, the spell could miss and fizzled quite a bit. We have fixed that now. The missile will now follow the initial target, which means it'll always properly hit. If the target dies while the missile was in flight, the missile will travel to that location and then split. So you're going to see more consistent Vel'Koz missiles, which is good. Like, we should, glad we did this. But just keep an eye on Vel'Koz. He might be strong because, again, patterns are there for a reason. And when we usually change stuff like this, champs get better.
Yeah, well, the main thing is here that it's frustrating when it happens and no fizzles. We're going to fix the fizzles. Basically, Vel'Koz is consistent. You can rely on Vel'Koz. But as Mart mentioned, this change is very good. So Vel'Koz will be a lot better next patch. The thing that kind of makes me feel a little bit better about this is that we're also nerfing the early game of Swain, and nobody's 6 Void is good-ish, but not that good. And so this kind of helps helps Void as well. So that should be a good thing.
Yep. All right. On the 5-cost side, you want to talk about Aphelios? 4-cost. I can't use numbers. 4-cost.
Yeah. So Aphelios is really struggling, even in the comps where it's an Aphelios comp. It's really an Urgot comp. Urgot does way more of the heavy lifting in that type of comp, or Sejuani does a lot of the heavy lifting in that comp. And so Aphelios himself isn't actually satisfying to run and itemize and things like that. And he doesn't do enough. And so we're giving him a fairly large mana buff. This is going to help not only get his first cast out faster, it gets his chakrams out, and it also helps keep his uptime on the chakrams so that he can more consistently do heavy single target damage. On top of this, we're giving him a small buff to the chakrams AD percent. And the biggest, not the biggest one, but the last thing is we're increasing the speed of his ultimate missile. You've seen times when this misses, and when it misses, it just feels so bad because not only do you not get the damage from it, you also don't get that bonus chakrams from the unit's hit, and need to increase his reliability. He's a 4 cost, and this is a change that we should have done earlier.
Yeah, I think Aphelios has a high cap if you can hit it and get a really stacked board, and the fight lasts 20 seconds or longer, but too many conditions compared to all the other 4 costs, and so particularly the Chakram AD, I'm hoping will really allow him to burn through single targets a little quicker than he was before.
Yep.
Cool. Lux, like we said, negative armor, negative MR, very confusing for our game, so we're mostly trying to remove it from the game completely. They'll probably just won't exist in the future, but Lux was the other one who could do that. She can't do that anymore. To compensate, and because it just feels better, we're also allowing her to turn faster after she kills a target or needs to move, so that she might actually catch back up and laser them and not waste her entire spell. So again, just quality of life for Lux here.
Yep.
Shen, you want to talk about Shen?
Yeah, so Shen is a unit that you really want to itemize when you have Ionia on your board, especially, Karma Ari or the 6 Ionia board. And he's really good in that. He's really, really tanky. But outside of that, you kind of have him on your board as a triple trait bot. You don't really itemize him. You put items on your Sejuani, on someone else, on your Sion, someone else. And so we kind of want to shift away from that. Reducing his Ionia bonus, this looks relatively small, but it's a 10% nerf to his tankiness when the Ionia bonus is when Ionia is active, and giving him a little bit of power back into the self shield so that outside of Ionia being active, you still are tempted to itemize him.
Yep, sounds good. I know that Shen Karma Ari group is pretty good.
Yep.
Urgot, this champion is really good. It's interesting. I think it was Soju that was talking about how Grandmaster Plus, this is like the most played champ by far, but as you go down the elo rung, people are playing it less and less. It's just like people haven't quite figured out at lower elos how good he is, but he is really, really good. He's sometimes tankier than tanks while dealing as much damage as Nephelios. So bringing that down. And again, because we're at this point in the set, we don't want to swing too hard, so we're lowering his shield and his damage, but honestly, he'll still probably be very good.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to thrash her, but in my opinion, not in my opinion, but he is the unit that kind of carries a lot of the comps that he's in, and he is one of the strongest units of the patch, basically. So hitting him on both axes, this is probably one of the bigger swings of the entire patch, but he needs it. He's really, really good, especially in conjunction with Zeri.
Yep. Speaking of which, Yasuo, this is a big one, but I'm excited for this one. Why don't you talk about Yasuo?
Yeah, so Yasuo is really good with rapid fire cannon, RFC, hits a corner, kills whatever thing in the corner, becomes an assassin, really, really good. But outside of that, he really just falls over too quickly, doesn't deal enough damage. He's not very reliable of a carry. And so we're giving him a decent spell damage boost, and as well as a small health boost. That way he's just overall a little bit better in a standard, Titan's Resolve, i.e. Deathblade, that kind of build. But we're no longer letting him scale his spell with attack range, so you can no longer do the RFC into the corner thing. He still will be decent with RFC because it gives him, a bunch of attack speed, but he can't snipe people in the corner anymore.
So Yasuo is no longer the best rogue in the game. Got it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but like I said, I think this will be a healthier play pattern than do I have RFC? If not, don't play Yasuo. So Zeri is another champion, and again, don't want to swing too hard with some of the Zaun changes, robotic arm. as well as the Urgot changes. So the spell duration is just going down by a second and hitting 10% less hard, and it's only the spell bounce, so she won't quite delete backliners as fast. She still has that execute, so she's still really good. Remember, Gunner 4 and 6 got buffed, so this is kind of balancing that out. Maybe forces her to actually take her traits, because like right now, most people barely even play 2 Gunner with her. So just trying to actually make her need her traits a little more.
Yeah, and just as a refresher, we're also nerfing Robotic Arm, which is one of the key things that makes Zeri like super good. And then we're also hitting Urgot, so that hits some of the tankiness in her front line, and also some of the assistant splash damage to the back line when Urgot dashes past the front line. So overall, like I think Urgot was a bigger, more egregious in this comp, but still Zeri needed nerfs, and so we're hitting her at a medium amount, basically.
Yep. Azir, this is one of the changes that'll end up in like the small change section on the patch notes. Just a tiny buff here. We still think Azir actually might have some like ramp up things we want to change at some point, but for now we did the Shurima buff and this felt like enough to again not have that thrash. So just again, very tiny 5% buff here.
Yep, part of the fine tuning. We don't want to swing too hard.
Yep. All right, probably the biggest slide here. Why don't you just power through these, since I know you worked on a lot of these?
Yeah, definitely. So last patch we nerfed Aurelion Sol, one of his augments, slowed down how fast people can get to 5 costs, but still 5 cost boards are kind of dominating. They're really powerful, and they beat out a lot of the even higher tier traits when you hit them. And so these next couple slides, we're going to be hitting basically most of the 5 costs, and there's a nerf to about 5 or 6 of them. So it's going to go relatively quickly off of them. Aatrox, he is getting a spell duration buff. He's one of the ones who is not really good as a carry, but he's really good because of Darken. And so we're nerfing the Darken health and putting more power into Aatrox. We're also increasing his reliability, because when he comes back to life, you just take him down to like 10% health before he can start swinging. Now he'll be untargetable during that time, and so he'll start with full health and fight 1v1 basically.
Okay, wait. I got a comment here. Ahri, yeah. I see 3 nerfs. So are we just making Ahri unplayable? Is that the play here? 3 nerfs?
3 nerfs? Just count all the nerfs on the.
She's unplayable.
Unplayable. Ahri's still gonna be good. We are nerfing Ahri. Instead of hitting her really hard and like making the big boom not do anything, or making the Ascent Thefts practically useless, we're going light on each aspect of her. To keep her still good, and we want that big boom to be satisfying. That big boom should deal a lot of damage, especially if you have Vertical Sorcerer. But kind of hitting that a little bit, also hitting the Sense Theft damage, and then the Mana Reave is just kind of a lot of a utility on her, whether or not you like appreciate it or not. And so we're bringing that down to the minimum Mana Reave amount. Belveth, we're nerfing her damage slightly, but the bigger part is we're nerfing how well she scales with attack speed. So now when you have Ionia Belveth, you have vertical challenger Belveth, it'll still be good. That was insane in the past. She would like stab people so many times, and so that comes down. Heimerdinger, Repair-O-Matic is not purchased that often, but it should be a valuable option when you want an additional frontline. And so this is a pretty big change. It's pretty much a rework, but the turret will now revive over 7 seconds at all levels. But as you upgrade the levels, you get more and more armor. And we've seen this when we played it internally. When you get 3 of it, this turret is tanky. So it should be able to be a valuable like 2-star frontline for you basically, and it should be really good. So try that out. And then Mechanoswarm, really, really valuable. Everyone loves it for the burn. We're narrowing the cone by reducing the number of rockets fired. So now you kind of have to kill through the front line before you can splash all of the back line. And so be a meaningful nerf there. Next is a bunch of rises. The first rise is any unit that Rise pulls in is now started up to at least Rise's level. Battle City Rise is good. 2-star Battle City Rise is less good. And so this kind of brings up that makes the gap between 1-star and 2-star a lot bigger. Should be really exciting. There's some cool things you can do here, especially if you hit 3-star Rise. That'll be really, really exciting. So,
yeah. Oh man, 3-star Rise bringing in a bunch of 3-star units. That'll be a little wild.
That'll be a video for sure.
Yeah, pretty excited for a lot of these changes. Hopefully, should make the 5 costs less, the ultimate win condition, especially around Ari and Belveth, and even Heimerdinger a little. So should be good. All right, let's keep going because we got more. Next slide.
Cool. Again, I'll power through these, and then Mort, you can make. Cool. So Rise Ionia, one of the best rises. CCs the board, heals, kind of does a lot of everything. A small nerf to the mana, especially the starting mana, because his impact in the beginning of the fight is too large. But we're also nerfing his heal when you 2-star him. He does a lot. He already hits more units as well. The spell damage, you'll see a spell damage nerf on 3-star. This is not really intended to be a nerf. It's more just, if you watch the fight with the 3-star Rise, making everybody dance and slowly pounding them down with 5.0 attack speed, it's a lot of fun. And so we want to keep that so that he doesn't just nuke the board.
Yep.
Piltover Rise, he's not good enough at 2-star. Basically, like, we want this to feel like the spell damage share really matters. And so we're buffing up the spell damage share at 2-star. Just to bring that up a little bit. Targon Rise, he has a really long spell ceremony, and so he's getting a starting mana buff, so that can just come a little bit quicker into the fight. It takes a lot of time to resolve anyways. And then the gap between 1 and 2-star just isn't big enough right now. We want to make sure 2-star is worth it and good, and a meaningful difference from 1-star. And so that's why there's a sizable buff here for the max HP damage that he deals. And the last one is Zaun Rise casts really quickly and does a lot and provides a lot of utility, bringing that down and also slowing down his cycle. He's just a tad too good.
Yep. I think the big one here actually is Targon Rise, the 2-star. Going from 25% to 30% health. Percent health damage is a really complicated mechanic, especially because it scales with AP. So this is the kind of thing where all of a sudden, if you can get, a death cap and a jeweled gauntlet, all of a sudden you're doing, 70% of their health, plus then it can crit, and you can just wipe out boards with this thing. So I would keep an eye on Targon Rise as a possible win condition. Otherwise, like you said, lots of small adjustments here just to get Rise in the right place after the changes last patch.
Yep.
And then the last two.
All right, the last two. These are two other... You can ask any challenger, these are two of the most valuable units you just throw on your board. They give so much utility without items. And so Senna is getting a Redeemer nerf, pretty sizable Redeemer nerf, but needed. She shields a lot. She provides utility. This is really good, but she just, man, your team gets so much damage from this Redeemer buff. And then Sion, he's got just this massive health pool that, you barely feel the decay. We're making the decay so that after he revives, even if he's not targeted, he's dead in 5 seconds. And so a 1-star itemless Sion is going to be meaningfully less impactful to a fight.
Yeah, I think the Senna change is really good here. There was a lot of invisible power that people didn't quite understand, especially because it would activate off any shield, not just her shield. And so throwing in a Senna in a comp and then having something like a Taric cast or whatever could do a lot of work, and so that's a good nerf. Sion, I don't know. Sion, I still think is going to be very valuable. He's just such a ball of meat, and then you get that backline CC. So I still think he'll be the best frontliner in the game. Like you said, hopefully this just lowers that a little.
Yep, there might be more we need to do here. We just, again, it's fine tuning, small changes, things like that, but going to keep an eye out for sure continuously on these 5 costs.
Yep. All right, on the item side, Shimmer Scale. The Shimmer Scale augment is basically one of the best augments in the game, maybe even the best augment in the game at 2-1. It's an amazing augment. So pretty much across the board, Shimmer Scale items getting hit. Draven's Axe, probably the lowest hit, but still 10% less gold here. So you're getting 10 to 9 gold. Gambler's Blade gives you less attack speed and less gold on proc. Goldmaster Staff, a little less AP, and the no starting mana. Still just as much gold, though, so should still be good. Mogul's Mail probably gets hit the hardest here. 200 less base health. That is a big nerf. And then Needlessly Big Gem, undoing the buff from last time, goes from 600 to 500.
Yeah, just a lot of tuning these things down. Last patch, if we did the postmortem, we probably shouldn't have buffed some of these Shimmer Scale items, but these are I think regardless of the changes from last patch, we would have needed to do these anyways, just because Shimmer Scale items are, the ceiling of Shimmer Scale's items are so high.
Yep. And then same with Ornn items. Death Defiance, a little less attack speed, but also fixed a bug where it doesn't cleanse itself off Edge of Night and Rogue. We've seen some weird examples where a Dust Defiance Zed just disappears because it cleansed itself and then killed himself, which is not great. Trickster's Glass, really good item that people have figured out how to use, which is awesome. But now it will have less base stats, so less armor, MR, attack speed, and the clone will cast a little slower as well. And then Zonya's Paradox is probably the worst Ornn item in the game, which is funny because it was so good last set. But so we're giving it 15 more ability power to help that out. That should be a good AP item you're excited to put on an AP carry. Maybe something like Kaisa should be pretty good with it. But so pretty big buff to that item.
Yep.
Cool. All right, augments. I'm just going to power through these and then Kent, any follow-up? Ascension is an augment that has been underperforming on the legend side, so it goes from 45 to 50. Challenger Crown, we usually don't give double items, so Rapid Fire Cannon wasn't really the intended thing here. Changing it to Hand of Justice, you can call it a buff or a nerf, it depends. It's really kind of average. Dueling Gunners, just 3% more initial attack speed to try to help Gunners out a small amount. Nothing crazy here. Endless Horde gets nerfed at 3-2, so it goes from 8 gold to 6, but we made an Endless Hordes Plus at 4-2 that gives 9 gold, so that's technically a 1 gold buff, so now it's broken and the most powerful augment in the game. So definitely makes Endless Hordes more fun. Frequent Flyer is another one that has its use cases, but it's still just too hard to take advantage of, so we're lowering that down to 8 gold. I think Frequent Flyer is going to be very good now for certain comps, so at this point, if this augment isn't good here, it probably just has to go away, but I think this augment's going to be great. Haunted Shell gets a pretty big buff here. I think this augment was a little underpowered even in Shadow Isles, but getting that stacking resistances up. This is a 30% buff. Don't sleep on this. Late Game Specialist can no longer be offered with level up or vice versa. So this is just one of those silly win conditions where you take a soul, you get level up, and then if 3-2 is late game specialist, see you at the finish line. Don't really need that. We don't really want these like augment combinations that are auto wins, so that goes away. Mana Burn is re-enabled. We fixed the bug with it that was crashing the game. That's fixed. Mana Burn's back. Parting Gifts. The shield is now added after the item is granted. Should hopefully be a buff for things like Warmogs getting passed and things like that. Perfected Repetition. This is the multicaster one that is still a bit weak, so we're giving you more AP per cast and a more max AP. I'm a little worried on this augment, I'm not going to lie, but we'll see. 90 AP is really good if you can get to it. You do have to get to it, though, so we'll see. Probably one of the bigger changes of the patch, Portable Forge. The armory choices went from 3 to now based on stage, and obviously the biggest impact here is the Ornn Legend. So if you're taking the Ornn Legend now, you're only going to get 2 choices, which is a nerf. But if you take this augment on like 4-2, you're now going to get 4 choices, which is a buff. And so that should be pretty good, and is a little bit of a nerf to that Ornn Legend. And then finally, Riftwalk, overperforming a bit if you get it in the perfect circumstance, but again, trying to be very light here, so just a 3 AP per cast nerf.
Yeah, with Portable Forge, in the beginning of the game, you have more flexibility. You haven't really, locked into anything, and Ornn items are fun. Ornn items are strong. It's great. But later in the game, when there was only 3 choices, it's a lot tougher to hit something that you could use on, especially on 4-2. So you're making that a little bit more playable. But otherwise, yeah, it's a nerf to the Ornn Legend. Parting Gifts, just want to shout out that this is something that I got player feedback from, and I really wanted, players were like, I really want this to work with Warmogs, and I want to pass around things that give health and have these massive shields and have more like different ways to play this. And so we thought this would be a cool way for players to experiment. There's other viable strategies now to pass around this shield, and it should be a fun way to play. More than one way, the ZZ way to play Parting Gifts.
Cool. And then the second page, Return on Investment, another reroll one that gets a buff. I think this augment has its place for sure. So it just makes that a bit easier. It pays to learn 1, 2, 3. So Aurelian Soul Legend nerf here. But basically you're going to get 2 less gold, 4 less gold, 4 less gold. The XP is unchanged, so it's not a massive nerf by any means, but it is a nerf. Shimmering Inventors, this augment has been in a weird spot. Most people just play it for the gold. It's nice to get that random gold for your Piltover units, but getting 50% attack speed on champions like Echo wasn't very good. So now instead of attack speed, it's going to be bonus damage. It is a little bit less because bonus damage is a more valuable stat, but bonus damage can scale really well. Shurima's Legacy is just overperforming a bit, and with the Shurima buff, kind of had to compensate a bit, so pulling out of Shurima's Legacy a little. The boss gets another buff. I feel like this augment gets buffed every patch. Eventually, he is going to be truly the boss. You get more attack speed and AP per sit-up, but more importantly now, he will cleanse negative debuffs before doing sit-ups. So if you have grievous wounds now, you're not going to get your healing impaired, so that's going to be good. Too healthy, we definitely over-nerfed this one last time. We added that unique clause, which was great, but we didn't also need to nerf the HP, so that goes back to 111. And then What the Forge. This is a great one, and I'm going to tell the story of this because we had a dev on the team who played What the Forge and proceeded to get 5 obsidian cleavers. And so this really just goes to show that when you're building a system that has variance like this, you really have to protect for some of those bad outcomes. Nobody wants 5 obsidian cleavers. And so now we've put in some protections to make you less likely to get multiple copies of the same item. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people want 5 Trickster's Glasses, so we're not like outright preventing it. But especially Obsidian Cleaver, we're making it very unlikely to hit Obsidian Cleavers. We're trying to lower that variance so that this augment doesn't necessarily screw you by giving you 5 Obsidian Cleavers.
Yeah, we really want to maintain the chaos that What the Forge brings. In most of things we do in TFT, we want to maintain that chaos because it's exciting and it's fun and you get these experiences that are extremely memorable. But we also want to put in safeguards to prevent you from super low rolling. And so whenever we put in these types of safeguards, it's always to prevent the worst case scenarios, and hitting 5 Obsidian Cleavers is the ultimate worst case scenario. So won't happen.
Cool. All right. Well, we made it. Now we're at bug fixes, and we've got 2 slides, so I'm just going to, do that thing where I talk really fast. Fixed a bug where Recombobulator could cause strongest unit calculations to behave weirdly. Great. Yorick's Graveyard no longer grants an item when a player triggers Last Stand or Final Reserves. Cool. Champions granted by Stars Are Born are now properly starred up in Ghost Armies. Great. Rolling for Days augment no longer fails to make the first reroll after a carousel round free. Cool. Shimmer Injector now correctly prevents being executed before it procs. Eat that, Zeri. Rek'Sai will no longer execute Tarek if he is shielding her target when she tries to execute them. Cool. Thresh Sanctum now works in Hyperroll. Cool. Crown of Demacia can now no longer be reforged in Double Up. Crown of Demacia can no longer be used on benched units in Double Up. Interesting. Zed now gets the correct bonus from Ionia 9. Thank you, Leduc. Senna and Sion can now apply the burn from Morello with their abilities properly. Great. Bonus health on Chem modded from Chemtech Enhancements augment will now be updated immediately when a Chem mod is removed. Cool. Second page. Teemo 1 star now has the correct spell damage value. Okay. Teemo 1 better. That's good. Glask Industries now correctly grants gold when you build a craftable emblem on a unit of the same trait. Cool. That doesn't happen often, but I'm glad. Fixed a mission that could not be completed as it required selling the T-Hex. Got a lot of DMs about that one. Dedication will no longer break if you field 4 units of a trait that has no emblem. Multicaster, Yordle. Fixed an exploit that could allow you to have a 4-star Yordle without having 3 3-stars actively fielded. Cool. If multiple Blacksmith's Gloves roll Trickster's Glass, they will now all clone the correct unit. Great. Adjusted the click radius for Rek'Sai and Poppy. Got a lot of complaints about that one. Pandora's Bench and Recombobulator can now correctly roll Rise. What the Forge now properly removes item buffs from units taken from Carousel. Shurima now functions on Ghost Armies. And fixed a bug where Rek'Sai's spell was scaling twice as much as intended from damage amp. Thank you, Tanner, for that one. So, yeah.
Yeah, just one thing to call out here. We did find that Pandora's Bench and Recombobulator cannot roll Rise. We're gonna get that fixed in the patch notes. It won't be in the patch notes, that kind of thing. But that's one that we're gonna fix for next patch. So,
gotcha.
Just one call out.
And there you go, patch 13.16. 13.17 is the last one, which basically means in about 2 weeks, Kent, we're gonna be revealing all the mid-set stuff.
Ooh, that's exciting! It's time. I love this point of the set. Well, I love most points of the set. I also love revealing the next thing because seeing all the reactions is always really exciting. And it's also being able to share the stuff that we've been like cooking up. So,
yeah, I've been teasing people because one of the changes coming in the mid set is something that honestly we could have done all the way back in set 1. It's been a long time coming. You know, the thing. So Tim's
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Tim's thing.
Tim's thing.
Yeah,
Yes,
that should make it
yes.
very clear what I'm talking about. So.
Yes, yes. Very fun.
But then we got all the new champs, the new traits, the new other stuff. So it should be fun. But again, hopefully this puts the patch in an even better spot. Hopefully it really hits the big outliers, the Samira, the Urgot, the Ari. So hopefully we hit those mostly and did a few other changes around that and should be in a better spot.
Yeah, and as mentioned earlier, lots of fine tuning, lots of small changes here and there. We don't expect the meta to shake up too much. We just want to bring down, when I say this, bring down the top, bring up the bottom, but only a little bit because we're doing really small changes, that kind of thing. So, also, as always, we're on the lookout. We're gonna, this is a big patch because lots of tournaments going on around now, all across the world. So we're gonna keep an eye out on the meta, make sure it's healthy, as always.
Cool. All right, that's going to do it from us. Another patch rundown. We'll be back every 2 weeks, same bat time, same bat channel. So, all right.
Cool.
That's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.
See ya.